It's the 25th of March, 2015. We're at the Knickerbocker Middle School in Lansingburg, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm the videographer. Former Senator Roy McDonald is the interviewer. And sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Well, my name is Thomas Hoolihan, but my nickname is Tucker Hoolihan, and that's what most people refer to me as, Tucker Hoolihan.
Okay.
And you're from Troy, New York?
Well, born in Troy, New York, but in a section of Troy called Lansingburg, and my mother said, "You're actually from Lansingburg. Once you're a burger, you're always a burger." That's what my mother told me. So,
That's where you lived when you went into the Army?
yeah. Well, I never moved out.
Tell us about the Army.
Well, the Army, first of all, I got shot before I got in the Army because I was walking down the street one day and there was some guys hiding up in the roof of a garage, and they were getting ready to win World War II, and they had a .22 caliber rifle up there, and they used me as target practice. And I said to the guy I was walking down the street with, I said, "Why did you punch me in the arm?" He says, "I didn't punch you in the arm. What happened is I got hit with a bullet from a .22 caliber. From these guys were using me as target practice before they went into service. So I had to go down to Leonard Hospital to get the bullet taken out. So when I went in the Army, I knew what it was like to get shot because I had already been shot. So then I went in the Army. I graduated from high school in June of 1950. And a week after I graduated from high school, the Korean War broke out. The guys from the north came across the border and took on the guys from the south. And all of a sudden, because they had the United States were members of the UN, the troops that were stationed in Japan immediately went to Korea and started fighting for the Koreans against the guys from the north. So I knew it was going to be just a matter of time till I was going to go in the Army and be one of those guys. So I had planned on going to college after high school, but I had to put that on hold. And I figured I'd go in the Army first and then go to college. And I could go to college under the GI Bill of Rights. That's providing that I came home alive. So I took that gamble, and I didn't go to college. I stayed home and played baseball in the summer, and then I went to work at the Waterfleet Arsenal in the winter, and then I waited for the Army to catch up to me, and then they caught up to me in the summer of 1952, and I went off to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania for 16 weeks of basic training, and then after the end of basic training, the general got up in a big stand and he said to us that we had just completed 16 weeks of basic training, so we are now all trained killers. Well, I said to myself, I don't really feel like a trained killer, but if he says I am, I must be. So I was able to come home for a week and spend time with my family before I had to go back down to Pennsylvania, get on a troop train, and go to Seattle, Washington, and then go from Seattle over to Japan, get a rifle, get on a LST, and land in Korea. Was assigned to the 40th Infantry Division, and went up online, and basically in those days we were cleaning up the damage that were done during the night by the artillery coming in, and then get ready for the next the next assault, and every night we went out on patrol, where we probed the enemy to make themselves shoot back to know where they are. Well, when they do that, they're using us as target practice. So we had to keep walking till we got shot at, and then we knew where they were, and then the artillery came in and back and forth. And then one night I was in a bunker, and the guys from the Chinese army, because by then it was the Chinese army, because the Korean army was all wiped out, so the Chinese army came over and took us on. Well, when they came over, they would come over in waves of guys. They had more guys than they knew what to do with, so they used their troops basically as cannon fodder, and half of them guys didn't even have a rifle. So they came over, and we had to hold them off and stuff. So one night they got lucky, and they dropped a round in on the bunker that I was in, and they blew up the bunker. The next thing I know, I'm on the bottom of the bunker, and I got all the timbers on top of me and everything, and they're digging me out, and then I was alive. So then I went over to Japan for a while to get patched up, and then after you got patched up, they sent you right back over where you came from, which was Korea. I told them, I'm not from Korea, I'm from Troy, New York, but they sent me back to Korea. They wouldn't listen to me. They sent me back to Korea. They must have thought I was Audie Murphy or something. So I go back to Korea and praying that I don't get another round on me. And eventually I got transferred to the 3rd Infantry Division, which was a first-class outfit. I got to be a staff sergeant in the 3rd Infantry Division, and one day I was standing on the side of a hill, and we were being relieved by the Marines, because we had done all the fighting, and when that happened, when you're finished fighting, that's when they send the Marines in. Mr. Kissick will attest to that. So the Marines were coming up the side of the hill to relieve us, and I'm standing on the side of the hill, and I got my helmet on and dirty fatigues and everything, and all of a sudden the sergeant bringing the Marines up come over and said to me, "Are you from Troy, New York?" And I said, "Yes, I'm 10,000 miles from home." I said, "Yeah, I'm from Troy, New York." He said, "Well, one of my men knows you." I said, "Well, can he come over and say hello?" He says he can if I give him permission. I says, "Oh Lord, the Marines are tough." So he let the guy come over, and the guy talked to me, and he told me he knew me, and I didn't recognize him, but he said he used to hang out at the Knotty Pine Tavern in Troy, and he was a friend of Eddie McDonough, who was a local politician, and all. We had a nice conversation. He was a nice guy, but I don't know how the heck he recognized me, because I didn't even recognize myself. I was all beat up and everything, and old clothes and everything, and he knew me. And that made me feel good that I got the chance to talk to somebody from back home. 10,000 miles away, and here you are talking to a guy from back home. And then one time I got to go to a USO show, and I'm sitting there on a sandbag watching the show, and then they had an intermission between acts. There were 2 guys sitting in front of me, and the guy sitting in front of me, who I didn't know from anything, he said to the other guy, "Can you mail this letter for me?" And the guy said, "Yes." "The letter?" passed right in front of my eyes. And the letter was being mailed to Troy, New York. And I said to the guy, "Are you from Troy, New York?" He said, "Yes." I never would have known it if he wasn't mailing the letter. So then we had a nice conversation about back home. Because you people know that when you're 10,000 miles from home and you meet somebody from your hometown, it means a lot, you know? And I had my compass that I was using, it said it was made by the Gurley Company in Troy, New York, and that made me feel good. Something from back home. Yeah, those kind of things mean something. So then they got tired of looking at me in the 48th Infantry Division, and they transferred me over to the 3rd Infantry Division. And by then I was a sergeant, and so you got a better chance of staying alive if you're a sergeant.
Tell me
So-
about the weapons. What kind of rifle did you use? Were you happy with the equipment that you had?
Now, there's a rumor that I used a musket from the Civil War, but they gave us, because the Korean War broke out all of a sudden and we weren't really prepared. So what they did, they gave us rifles that were left over from World War II, which were M1 rifles, which were a good, reliable, accurate rifle. So we used M1 rifles, 12 rounds and then another clip, and they were accurate.
How about the food? What were you having, K rations back then?
Food? I don't remember food. It was basically rations. Yeah, so what
Did you have a
happened
favorite?
was,
Yeah.
what happened is, they had, in Korea, everybody in the country of South Korea got involved in the war. So if you were too old to be in the army, you were made what they call a chogi, and you did work like they put the packs on your back, and they carried the food up to the guys up on the line. The old guys did. They carried the food up on the line, and they would dig out the ditches along the side of the road. Everybody did something. And the younger guys, they went in the Korean Army, and then they filtered into our army, and they weren't really the greatest soldiers in the world, but at least we were able to put them out front on a patrol, so if there was a mine, they would step on it first. It was their country, not ours, so we got accused of using them guys from South Korea as cannon fodder, and we were told not to be putting them out front first, so they thought it'd be better if the American kids got blown up rather than the Koreans, and we thought it was better for the Koreans to get blown up than us, so we continued to put them out first on the patrol.
What do you think of your officers over there?
I had good officers. I had good officers. Really good. In fact, I had David Eisenhower one time, Dwight Eisenhower's son, as my battalion commander.
Wow.
And he come up one time on I was on an outpost, and he come on the outpost to find out how we were doing. And then he went back 5 minutes later. And because he was out there for 5 minutes, he got awarded the Bronze Star. I was out there all night and got nothing. But he was Eisenhower, so he got a Bronze Star. Yeah, and then my company commander was married to a girl from Menands, New York. So when I went to Japan, he gave me some money to buy her something to send back to her. So I bought her a set of china. I took it down to the post office and they sent it back to her in Menands. So that's how I found out he was from Menands, which was only right down the road from Troy. So you had a lot of different things happening.
What persons would you remember best?
What?
Which persons over there, what individuals that you met in Korea that you remember best? Friends, officers, sergeants?
Well,
Who stands out?
My friend was over there at the same time I was.
Were you with him in the same unit?
No, he was in the Marine Air Force. His name was Ted Williams. He was a baseball player. Okay.
I'm talking about people, okay.
Well, every time the plane would come over, the Marines would come over in their fighter plane, and they would dive down on the enemy bunkers and drop napalm and fly up. I would always say to the guys, that was Ted Williams, and they'd say to me, is he the only one that flies the planes? I said, he is in my book. So that was a fun thing we had about Ted Williams. But,
Did you receive any decorations, medals, or commendations while you were over
Oh
there?
yeah, I should have brought some of them
Well,
here, but I left them home.
I see the combat
I
infantryman's
got the
badge.
combat infantry badge, yes, I got that, and a couple other medals. And the Korean government themselves, they gave me 3 of these big medals if I wore them all at once. And I was on a troop ship and I got hit with a torpedo, I would have went right to the bottom. They were so big and heavy. I was wearing them things. So they gave me 3 medals from the Korean Army, and I got medals from the United States Army also. And I'm also a 90% disabled veteran from the wounds I received in Korea. And the VA hospital in Albany, New York has been wonderful to me. They have treated me very well. Anytime I go down there, they took care of me, and I live on the 2nd floor of my home. And they came, they measured my length of my stairs, and then they had a stair lift put in my house. They had it made overseas in England, special, and because my stairs go around the bend, and they had it made over in England special, and they installed it in my house for me. So when I go home, I just sit in a chair, press a button, and right up the stairs I go.
Tucker, when you were in Korea, did you communicate a lot with your family back home?
Well, I tried, but they didn't want to communicate with me. They had their own lives. No, what happened was, I wrote one time, I told my mother where I was, so she sent a package over of stuff. And what happened is, the ship got sunk in the harbor. I never got the package, so I wrote to her and said, don't send any more packages because the Navy doesn't have that many ships. Anything with my name on it, they're gonna sink the ship, so I didn't get any more. But one time, I had a guy in my company with me that was a Korean soldier, and he was going to be able to go home and get married. So I wrote to my mother and I asked her to send my civilian suit over to him so he could get married in my suit because he was the same size as me. So my mother sent the suit over, and the kid went back to his hometown in Korea, and he got married in my suit. And my mother got a kick out of it because after he wrote to my mother, and he thanked my mother for sending the clothes over. And the very last line in the letter is what my mother got a kick out of, because in the letter he said to her, send more clothes. So there's little things happen as you're overseas that you think would never happen because you're so far away from home, you know what I mean?
How were you received when you came back from Korea?
Well, the first thing I was told was, so don't forget now, when I came home, I was walking into a bunch of guys that were in World War II. So the first thing they told me was to keep my mouth shut about what I went through in Korea, because according to them, what they went through in World War II was worse than anything I went through. So if I wanted to stay alive, I was told to keep my mouth shut about what I went through in Korea. So I was always a guy that liked to stay alive, so I basically kept my mouth shut. But I did go to the VA hospital, and they were wonderful to me in Albany, New York. I can't say enough about the VA hospital in Albany, New York. Those people have been wonderful to me over the years. And like I say, I'm a 90% disabled veteran, so I get a nice check every month, and anything I want, and I go to the VA hospital, and they give it to me.
And when you came back, you went to, tell us about your career and how the
Well,
Army
when I
ended.
came back, then I went back, because before I went overseas, I was working at the Waterfleet Arsenal as a temporary employee because I was ready to go in the Army. So when I came back, Waterfleet Arsenal had to take me back because by then I was a veteran. So I went back to the Arsenal. I'll never forget it. I go in the Arsenal, and I had to go in this building. And on one side of the building was where I told them I was back, and I went back to work at the Arsenal. Then I walked across the aisle, and across the aisle was the veterans part of the Arsenal, and that's where I signed up to go to Siena under the GI Bill in the evening. So I come out of there, and I was back to the Arsenal, and I was going back, started at Siena in the evening. So when I got back to the Arsenal, I got reassigned to the same building and the same man I worked for before I went in the Army. So I remember walking down the road that day, and I was happy to be home and alive. And I went in the office to report to the man I used to work for. And the first thing he did when he saw me was he threw his book on the desk and he says, "I want you to know one thing," he says. "I didn't want you back here, but they made me take you." He basically hated me, okay? So I said to myself, well, I'm home, I'm alive, and I don't care what this guy says. He can't fire me. If he's the President of the United States, he can't get rid of me. I'm a disabled veteran, and now I got an ace in the hole. He can't get rid. And this guy had never gone into service in his life, and he jumped up in my face and said he was mad that I come home alive.
Wow.
Wow, that's a slap in the face.
How long were you at the Arsenal?
You know where that man is now? 6 foot under. You know where I am? I'm alive. How long? I was, yeah. So I ducked and I jibed and I moved around because it's hard to hit a moving target. So I knew if I stood in one place, they'd fire me. So I kept moving. And after 37 years, I had transferred down to the Benet Weapons Lab, and I was the administrative officer at the Benet Weapons Laboratory when I retired 37 years later with a nice pension, and my nice pension from the VA hospital. So I've done well. And then I picked up the paper one day and I saw where this man named Roy McDonald, who I knew, was going to run for state senator, because he already was a congressman or a assemblyman. And then So then I just basically stayed home and took care of my grandchildren came along, and I was able to go to all their games and everything. And I was able to sit back and enjoy life and enjoy my 2 pensions. And as they say, we all lived happily ever after.
Now, did you stay in touch with anyone you were in the service with?
You know, when I first came home, I had been in the service with some guys from Connecticut. So those guys in Connecticut, they were from Bridgeport, Connecticut. There was a magazine called Life Magazine. And in that magazine one day was a picture of a nightclub like in Troy, New York, called the Airport Inn. And it had all these girls in the picture. So these guys from Connecticut says, well, that's the same town Hoolihan lives in, and all them girls are in that bar, so he must know some of them. So they came up from Connecticut, tracked me down to take them to that place so they could see them girls. That was nice, you know. So I stayed in touch with them guys over the years, and they were always nice to me.
Have you ever had a chance to go down to see those monuments down in Washington?
Oh, yes, sir. They finally decided to build a monument for the Korean War, a nice monument where these guys are going through like a swamp area or something, and there's soldiers there with their rifles under their ponchos and things. And by that time that they built that monument, I had been a member of the Korean War veterans. Right now, I'm the vice president. Oh man, I'm equal to Joe Biden, but I'm the vice president of Korean War veterans. So we had a nice bus trip down to Washington for the day that monument was dedicated. And when we got down there, President Clinton and the Vice President came up to the dedication, and it was a beautiful ceremony. And we were there for the whole weekend and got to see the whole town and everything. And they were very nice to us. And then, at the end of the weekend, they gave us a big parade right down the streets of Washington. We were going down the street in Washington. I'll never forget it. And I looked over to the right, and 1 block away was the White House. And I said to myself, holy mackerel, this little kid from Troy, New York made it to Korea, and now he's home and he's walking down the street a block from the White House. How did this all happen? But they gave us a very nice weekend.
Good.
Yeah, I remember that.
Let me
And
ask
then
you-
the guys back home, I'm a member of the Veterans of Lansingburg, so I go over to see those guys, and they're very nice to me, and I'm a member of the Disabled American Veterans, and they're nice, and I'm a member of the New York State chapter of the American Legion, so I belong to those organizations. I know the American Legion, they contact me anytime they're having a raffle, but otherwise, I don't hear too much from them guys. Yeah.
Is there any kind of wisdom that you took out of the Korean War that you would share with some
Yes,
of the
if
people
you can
today?
stay out of a war, stay the hell out of it, because it's not a good thing to be in the middle of. Nothing good comes out of it, but if you got a plan in your life to like go to college for nothing under the GI Bill, then it is good to go in the military first and then go to college, because you can go and the government will pay for your tuition at Siena, and then after that, the Watervliet Arsenal sent me to RPI, and they paid for my tuition at RPI. And in fact, when I was at RPI, they also paid for my meals in the faculty dining room every day, so I got that, and I gained a few pounds at RPI and walked out of there with a nice diploma, and the government has been very, very good to me. Very good. I cannot say one word bad about the way I've been treated by the government, the VA hospital, and all the veterans organizations. They have all treated me wonderful. I have no complaints.
Any topic you'd like to cover before we conclude?
what?
Any topic you'd like to talk about before we conclude?
Besides the Boston Red Sox.
Think about a young person coming in to watch this, or somebody who's not
Yes,
experienced with the military, and you're an older man that might be able to share with them some maturity and some experience.
Well, nowadays, it seems that the kids are taught or told or whatever that it's wrong to be in the military. Well, it's not wrong to be in the military. The worst thing the United States government ever did is when they eliminated the draft. Because when a lot of kids, when they got out of high school, they didn't know up from down. But they got drafted into the military. And when they come out of the military, they were a different kid. They were then a young man. They went in the Army as a kid, but they come out as a young man because you get bounced around in the military. You ain't got mommy home every night to go home to when she's got your supper on the table. You're out there, you're winging it on yourself. And you come out of it a better person. But somebody got an idea one time to stop the draft. And that's the worst thing that ever happened to this country. Because when the kids got drafted, at least they come out a man. And then they were on their own 2 feet, and they knew how to provide for themselves. We don't have that anymore. We got a bunch of guys, I don't want to say, but if you drive down River Street in Troy, New York, oh please. But the military is the best thing that could happen to these kids. It made them become a man. They don't have that anymore.
Well, I thank you. I'm so happy you were able to be here and to share some of this experience.
I'm happy to be here myself.
It's important that the generations that come down, how else are they going to learn? Okay? And they'll read about quotes in the books, but people like yourself, they're getting it right from a primary source, the individual that was there and made the commitment and the sacrifices. So we thank you.
Okay.